Just figure that out. Apologies, everybody. Assalamu alaikum and welcome, welcome. It's so good to have you folks here. Just so you all know, this is being recorded and also being broadcast live on Facebook. So wanted to put that out there. Thanks. Just a moment. All right, so this is what we're here to talk about. Happy Juneteenth, everybody. Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum to you all, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Demi Fozia Adeboade Laja. I'm the founder of the Afia Project. Just a very quick intro of our organization, the Afia Project. We are a wellness organization located in a DMV area, that's DC, Maryland, and Virginia. We're aimed at addressing health disparities in the Black community through public health programming and scholastic achievement support. Well, one thing to note is the Afia Project is a nonprofit organization, and as with every other nonprofit, our lifelines are the donations and grants that we receive. We rely heavily on those donations. One other way is through the Amazon Smile program, whereby Amazon gives a portion of whatever you purchase on Amazon to us as a small nonprofit. So I would like to encourage you all to please look us up. It's really easy. You don't have to do anything extra or special except to go on to smile.amazon.com. And it basically takes you to this web page. All you have to do is click on Get Started right there. And then you look for the Afia Project. Again, like I said, we get about 0.5% of eligible purchases that you make on Amazon. Seems like almost everyone is on Amazon right now. You're not actually doing the giving the money, but Amazon is paying on your giving a portion of your purchases in dollar amounts to us. So we really appreciate it. It's one way for you to help support our programming. This is some of the things that you'll see come up on your screen. You log onto your Amazon account as usual. And you can type in Afia Project or just Afia, and then this will pop up and select us, located in Beltsville, Maryland. Okay, easy enough, right? Inshallah, I hope you would decide to support us. So you should see it where it says Support Afia Project down once you sign up, and select us as your organization for your donations to go towards. Really appreciate that. All right. Lots of money on the table, so we'd like to get a portion of it. So anyway, that's not why you're here today. We're all here to learn about Juneteenth, celebration of freedom, Freedom Day, Jubilee Day. It's known by so many names. And we have two members of our community to help us understand what Juneteenth is and how we can mark this event. When we thought about this particular presentation, there was no better person that came to mind but a sociologist, right? Dr. Tariqah Nuriddin. She is an author, educator, and sociologist. She works in Maryland as an educational research and resides in Virginia with her husband and daughter. So without further ado, welcome Dr. Nuriddin, Dr. Tariqah Nuriddin. So off to you, Dr. Tariqah. I'll just go on to the next slide for you as needed.
Sure, thank you. Can everyone hear me well? If you can hear me, give me a thumbs up. I see some young people in the house, so I'm expecting the young people to be very good with these icons. Thank you. I'm seeing some thumbs. Great. I don't see some thumbs, so I'm hoping that my sound is well for you all. Welcome, everyone. Happy Juneteenth. This is a special Juneteenth because this is the first Juneteenth where Juneteenth is an actually recognized federal holiday as of Thursday, June 17th. President Biden signed a declaration to put Juneteenth as a federally recognized holiday. So we're really excited about that, and I'm really honored to be here today. So for those of you who don't know, let's talk a little bit about the history of Juneteenth. Juneteenth, so you notice in Juneteenth, you hear two things going on. You hear the word June and you hear teenth. The teenth aspect comes from 19. So that's where that teen part comes. So June plus the 19 is Juneteenth. And that day in history was actually June 19th, 1865. Okay? June 9th. I'm going to be quizzing you young people, all right? So I want you to really listen, all right? June 19th, 1865. All right? But prior to this day of Juneteenth, I'm going to talk about what that is. Just to provide some context, on January 1st, 1863, President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation declaring freedom for enslaved persons. Notice, if the Union won the Civil War, it was a push for the Union to win the Civil War. So, and it was also a push for persons who were freed or still enslaved to join the Union ranks so that the Union could eventually win the Civil War and become free. This is a really important part, over 200,000 Black soldiers enlisted to help ensure that the war was won. A lot of times when we hear about the freedom and the end of slavery, we hear the notions that President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation and he freed the enslaved persons. But really, what I want you to keep in mind, young people, that it was really on the hard work of freed African Americans and also African Americans who were enslaved that joined the Union ranks to win the Civil War, to push the tide so that the United States was able to, or I should say the Union was able to win the Civil War. All right. So it wasn't just coming from President Lincoln. This is a lot of effort on the part of African Americans to make this happen. All right. And that's something to keep in mind, that freedom just doesn't fall into your lap. You got to fight for it. All right. You hear me? Okay. You gotta, it's not just gonna come to you. Sometimes you gotta work towards it and you gotta struggle towards it. And those were the efforts of the Black soldiers who joined and to help win the Civil War. All right. So what happened on this day in history called Juneteenth, June 19th, 1865? Union soldiers came to a place in Galveston, Texas. All right. And they were led by a General Gordon Granger. All right. And it was during this time that General Gordon Granger said and let the enslaved African Americans know that they were free, All right. Notice this is taking place 2.5 years after, keyword, 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. All right. So what we need to keep in mind is, why is this taking so long? All right. The President Lincoln has signed the Emancipation Proclamation. That was on paper. All right. That was on paper. And also the Civil War was still going on. So when General Granger came into Galveston, Texas to announce this proclamation, those who were enslaved in Galveston, Texas did not know about this. This is really huge. And you got to think about how alarming that would be to find out, to maybe even find out that this happened 2.5 years prior and they're just hearing about it. But nonetheless, they got the news. They got what we call the good news, all right? And the good news is that they were no longer enslaved, all right? And there's a reason why I'm saying enslaved instead of slaves. Can any of you young people think about why I might use the term enslaved and not slaves? And you can feel free to raise your hand, or if my daughter's in the background. She's wildly raising her hand.
Well,
Okay.
let her go ahead and have a shot at it.
You want to? Okay. Let's see.
It's so cute.
Okay. What do you think?
Instead of just one of them, a few, there were like a lot of them. So it was like enslaved instead of slave.
Okay, that's a good guess. Okay, and I appreciate that guess. That's actually a really good guess. The reason actually that I'm using enslaved and not slaves is because slave is not something that they were born as. All right. So if you refer to Black people as slaves, that's not who they are. They're human beings. They were enslaved, meaning this is something that was done to them by oppressive force. All right. So it's really important that we keep in mind our terminology when we're talking about Black people who were under an institution of slavery and became enslaved. Remember, they were stolen from the continent of Africa, right? They were human beings. They were always human beings, all right? And slavery, the institution, dehumanized them. So we want to be mindful of our language and how we refer to them. They were enslaved. They were not slaves. All right. So June 19th, 1865, the enslaved persons of Galveston, Texas, get the news of their emancipation. And this is known as Juneteenth. It has many other names, Jubilee Day. And since that time, African Americans have used this day as a holiday, as a remembrance, as a celebration of freedom, of emancipation. But we really need to keep in mind, what does freedom and emancipation look like after you're no longer enslaved? And that's what I want to get into next. So there is a clip I wanted to show you. It's from Vice President Kamala Harris, a very historic clip where she is talking about the Juneteenth holiday. So I just wanted to play you a clip from that. It's really important to highlight that particular speech by Vice President Kamala Harris, who most of you may know is biracial, but part African, Afro-Caribbean, I should say, and part Indian. And so for her to be able to hold one of the highest political positions in the world, really, because of the nation, the stature of the United States, and to be able to introduce she's introducing actually President Biden, but to be able to talk about the importance of Juneteenth, I think that was like a hopefully a really special moment. All right. Next slide, please. All right. So I was mentioning about before, what does freedom look like? All right. So here is, I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with Norfolk, Virginia. So we're in the DMV area. So Norfolk is in the like the Hampton Roads area, further south. Like if it, and so this was posted. This is a post from the newspaper on July 11th, 1865, announcing what had happened. All right. Remember, it's a newspaper. There's no cell phones and so forth. So and I wanted to read what General Granger said because there's some context here that I think will be interesting. All right. So it says the slaves of Texas. Notice it says the slaves of Texas. All right. So the slaves of Texas declared free. The following general order was issued at Galveston by General Granger on the 19th. The people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with the proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired laborer. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. Think about that one. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere. Okay, can one of my young people give me maybe some understandings of what General Granger is saying here? He's announcing the freedom of the enslaved persons of Texas, but he's saying something else here. Can any of my do anyone of my young people want to chime in, or anyone who's participating today?
I may have to start calling names. I see some of our stars on here and senior stars. You guys know this. Ooh, okay, let's go with Abdul Salam. If you can turn on your camera, that'll be great too, if you're able to. He's not available. How about Omar?
I think that the slaves were free, but they were like he's telling them to like basically go back to their masters and work for them for like minimum wage, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very, very good. And so we get that from, so this line here where it says the freedmen. So now they're free, right? The freedmen. So that's referring to the formerly enslaved African Americans are advised to remain quietly, meaning don't cause no fuss, don't cause no ruckus, right? Be quiet, all right? And so that's interesting. So I mean, if you're just hearing that you are no longer enslaved, I mean, the natural reaction would be to be excited and happy, and it would be a celebration. But they're being told to be quiet and to remain where they are and work for wages. So thank you for that, Umar. Yes, they're essentially being told to stay where they are, work for wages from their former masters, which is, which once again represents a very interesting paradox. Because here you have, on one hand, you have, okay, you're free, but, and it's a big B-U-T, but you should remain quiet. You should work for wages where you are currently. So it really doesn't fully comprehend the monstrosity of the institution of slavery. Because if you were oppressed by someone, right, and you were living with your oppressor, and then you found out that you didn't have to live with them anymore, the notion that no, someone is telling you, no, you should stay here, it's very strange. So you see a disconnect. There's a huge disconnect here between the horrible atrocities inflicted upon enslaved African Americans and their freedom. All right, and this disconnect still plays itself out. People still kind of water down the institution of slavery, like, oh, it wasn't so bad, it just happened. No, it was a brutal institution. It was terrible in a number of ways. Any bad thing you can think of happened pretty much. I mean, it was just a really despicable institution. So I wanted to bring this to light. All right, next slide, please. So here, this is an advertisement, all right? And remember, this is from the Civil War era, all right? So this is why it kind of looks like this, right? But this is an advertisement for men of color to participate in the Civil War, all right? Remember, I told you that freedom isn't free, like it just doesn't come to you, right? So there was a huge push, as I mentioned, on the part of people of color to participate in their own freedom, all right? And not just to rely on the Union soldiers that were already there, but to join the ranks, all right? Because what was on the line, right? Remember in the Emancipation Proclamation, right? That the African Americans would not become freed unless the Union won the war. Understand the consequences here. If the Union did not win, then African Americans would still be enslaved. So what's on the line here is freedom. Freedom is on the line here. All right. So here's an appeal for African Americans to participate in the Civil War. Men of color, to arms, now or never. 3-year service, battles of liberty and the Union. Fail now and our race is doomed. Do you understand the stakes? These are high stakes here, all right? And had it not been the contributions of those men in color who fought valiantly against the Confederacy, where would we be now? We really want to think about that, right? And then it goes on to say, silence the tongue of calumny, valor and heroism. Our last opportunity has come, men of color, brothers and fathers. We appeal to you, strike now. And then it has another line, are freemen less brave than slaves? So that's a very kind of deep quote too. Are freemen less brave than slaves? So in other words, even if you're enslaved, right? It doesn't, at this point in time, you need to fight. You need to be of service for the cause of liberty, for the cause of freedom. Next slide, please. And here is just a sample of the proclamation by DC Mayor Muriel Bowser about Juneteenth. And as you can see, it has, it's an official proclamation. You added the one for the state of Maryland.
Yeah. Yeah, you done with the slide? I can just move to the next one.
Yeah, I could go on to the next one.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. And here is another proclamation by the state of Maryland about the Juneteenth holiday. So what is the significance of Juneteenth? That's what we really need to keep in mind today on this Juneteenth day. So yes, it marks the moment where the news of emancipation or freedom reached the former Confederacy, right? So yes, this is a moment where the news of emancipation that enslaved persons got wind of this news, okay? But it also signifies much more. It signifies the oppression that Black people suffered in America by a denial of their rights and any forms of justice. Does anyone know how long the institution of slavery was? Can anyone tell me? How long were Black people enslaved in America? I see a hand up. Is that Hanif and Abdullah? Can you unmute yourselves and tell me how long?
2 years and a half. 2 years and a half.
Okay. 2 years and a half. Okay, so 2.5. So you got the 2.5 part from, that was after the Emancipation Proclamation. Juneteenth happened, and that was 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. So you're right with the 2.5, but the length of time that African Americans were enslaved in this country is much longer than 2.5 years. But I definitely appreciate your guess. Does anyone else wanna? How long? Decades, centuries? So a decade is 10 years, right? A century is 100 years. All right. So in the interest of time, 246 years. And we're using our start point as 1619, when the first records of enslaved persons came to the American shores. So 246, so that's 2 centuries, 4 decades, and 6 years. All right. Now, imagine this going on for so long, the brutality that's existing for so long. This was a hard struggle and a hard fight. It wasn't just about the soldiers that took arms. There were many what we call insurrections on which are when enslaved persons rebelled against their masters, right? So we really need to keep in mind, this was a hard fight, a hard struggle. This is several generations. This is not just, 246 years span several generations, all right? So we're talking about a history of suffering of Black people in America that that was just ended, right? 246 years later. And it ended, but it really didn't end. And that's what I want to get into, because the mechanisms of oppression continued after Black people were free, right? Or freed, so to speak. There were structures in place. There were things called Black codes, which were laws that African Americans had to adhere to, okay? And if they didn't adhere to those laws, then they would be penalized. They could be killed at any point in time. And this is still the case today, right? That a Black person in America could be killed at will, all right? There were lynchings, there were Jim Crow laws, which made segregation between whites and Blacks as something that was legal and actually gave a lower status to African Americans, right? There were imprisonments. And so this is a lasting form of discrimination that still continues to persist. Next slide. So as I mentioned, and this is just some pictures to highlight what I was just talking about, the struggle for freedom continues. It's not over. Yes, we're celebrating Juneteenth today, but the struggle still continues. There was a colonial era, right, of African Americans who were enslaved in America. Then there was the post-American Revolution, and that's a picture of Frederick Douglass, who was formerly enslaved and actually was able to escape and have his own freedom. And the deep part about Frederick Douglass is he was able to become a spokesperson against slavery, against the ills of slavery. And he wrote an autobiography. I mean, think about this. This is amazing, right? You had African Americans fighting in the Civil War, right, and continuing to fight and press on. This is a picture in the lower left-hand corner. So this is representing African Americans who had to desegregate schools. So imagine having to go to an all-white school and being the only Black person to go to that school, and how you would be treated, how you might be yelled at. And so this is the process that has been taking place in America, right? The different water fountains, whites only, Blacks only, all right? And then to this very day, right, the Black Lives Matter movement and the struggle for freedom, as we say, still continues. Next slide. So we want to really think about, what does freedom look like for African Americans as we celebrate this Juneteenth day? And here are just a few takeaways. I'm not saying that this list is an exhaustive list. Please don't say this is it. If we do these things, then we're free. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, I'm just putting it out there, what freedom might look like for African Americans, because the truth is that we have a long way to go for true and encompassing freedom, all right, and encompassing freedom. And one way I would say, one means of becoming more free is to have political and economic equity and inclusion at a systemic level, all right? So, Barack Obama was known as the nation's first Black president. So that means in our political system, right, we need more people of color. We need more Black people in positions of power. okay, to help move our freedom forward, because no one is going to fight for your rights like you will. No one is going to speak up for you like you will. No one knows your condition like you. All right. So it's really important that we have political power. We have political equity. I use the word equity and not equality, because sometimes equality means like, okay, this person gets the same amount as this person. But equity entails justice. All right. And justice is not necessarily just these people get equal amounts of the same stuff. Justice is looking at what the atrocities have been, and then adding on another component to make it more just. All right. We also need to end the unjust mass incarceration that's affecting the African American community. Unfortunately, in larger numbers. So even though African Americans make up about 13% of the US population, we're overrepresented in the prison system. So that needs to change, and there needs to be some significant criminal justice reforms. A huge one is just having some level, magnitude of mass reparations for African descendants of slavery. That still has not happened yet. Okay, and that's something to keep in mind. Hopefully this Juneteenth holiday is a step in the right direction. But one thing we know is that the freedom will not fall in our lap. We have to continue to speak out and fight for what we're seeking. So reparations, right? When African Americans, when enslaved African Americans were free, they were left with nothing. They had nothing. They had no money, right? They were already through slavery separated from their families, okay? So it put them in a very negative position economically. Politically, they had no rights, all right? And this has continued from generation to generation to generation, all right? These things that happened in the past actually form and shape our future. So when we see high rates of poverty in predominantly African American areas, that doesn't just appear out of nowhere. That happens out of a systematic oppression, and this is also related back to slavery. We also need to what we call amplify Black voices. We need to hear from Black people as it relates to the freedom struggle, because like I said, no one knows our history and our needs more than we do, and we have to assert ourselves in that way. We need to end institutional racism and discrimination. All right, that's a huge one. Okay, so and this is related to the mass incarceration, because the incarceral system is an institution. All right, and we need to work towards ending the institutional racism. Right. We need educational initiatives, young people, you hear me? Your curriculum, your school curriculums, and what they're teaching you about Black people. And we need to amplify the voices of Black people in our schools, in the curriculum, right? It's a problem in the American curriculum, the educational curriculums, when you don't hear about the accomplishments of African Americans. All right. We're not just a footnote in history. Understand that African Americans built the United States. All right. 246 years of free labor built the United States. Okay. Keep that in mind. So our contributions to the United States have always been enormous contributions. All right. Enormous contributions. And we need to be represented in all different facets and areas, and especially in our educational initiatives. We need to have more conversations about dismantling white supremacy, white privilege, and we also need to shift with our understanding of racial and ethnic bias and improve upon that. And last but not least, Black lives must matter. All right. So we need to be in a place for freedom. I would say, in an ideal world, for freedom to happen, our lives have to matter. We have to be seen as having value. We can't be killed indiscriminately and no one held accountable for that. That suggests that our lives don't have the value, right? So we know that our lives have value. I hope you all know that your lives have value and meaning, right? And but we also need others to know that our lives have value. These institutions need to understand that our lives have value, so that we can't be we shouldn't be indiscriminately killed for no reason. All right. And an officer is getting off. It's just, that's not what freedom looks like. All right. So we have a lot of work to do. And I like to end with a Frederick Douglass quote: "If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle." Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you all. Happy Juneteenth.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nuriddin. I really appreciate that. Oh my goodness, so many nuggets, so many things to really take out of this presentation. But before we delve into it, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Sister Amirah Opara. She is an important and key part of the community. I have to get a whole bunch of things up my screen. She earned her degree. She's an economist, actually, earned her degree in international economic policy and later MBA in finance and accounting. And she's an important part of the AFIA project. I actually neglected to mention that Sister Amirah and also Dr. Nuriddin are both board members of the AFIA project as well. We really appreciate their time and value it. So I'm handing off to you, Sister Amirah. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to hear so many young people today. This is so important for generations to come, that you guys are online learning about this very important history. So as Dr. Nuriddin, and wasn't that presentation excellent? We learned so much. I've learned so much. So as she said, it's official. It's a holiday. So what I'm going to talk about is, some of the things that we can do to commemorate this great and important day. So now that it's a holiday, and most of you kids are not working, but at least you can tell your parents, convince them to take the day off. What you guys can do is plan something to do on that special day. You can make it a day of service and volunteer and do something that you love to do in the community. And now that we're learning, this is an important, very important step, that we're learning the full history of Juneteenth. It's very important that we learn more about it. So, Dr. Nuriddin has really given us the nuggets, the foundation. We can go more and learn more for ourselves. There's books that we can start reading, like Juneteenth by Ralph Ellison. For some of you older kids, you teenagers, that might be a good start. And then also there's a new book for adults by Dr. Annette Gordon-Reed. This is a book that was just released. She's talked about it on some shows. She herself was actually from Galveston, Texas. So she's talking from a personal experience from her family. So that's a really good book. So, and then there's this, if you go to this website, parents and kids, there's colorsofus.com. So these are for the kids and the children and teenagers, 14 books that they can start reading to learn more about Juneteenth as well. And then the Smithsonian has a bookstore as well, and they have a reading list that you can also check out. And there's actually a film called Miss Juneteenth that might be worth looking at with the family. And also, like, like Dr. Nuriddin said, it's a day to celebrate as well. We have to celebrate it. You know, one thing we did at my job yesterday, it was really nice. We had a trivia session about Juneteenth. And there was a lot I didn't know. So that was great. And then also we had like a playlist, a jam session, just playing, some songs. It's important to appreciate our Blackness, appreciate our culture, learn our culture, be proud of our culture. So you can, do something with your families. Let me ask you guys, have anyone celebrated Juneteenth at home before, and what have you done? Maybe you can share. Anybody want to share? Anyone? No? Well,
I'm
this
not.
is.
I'm
Go
not
ahead.
sure we did like much on Juneteenth, but we watched this like. I think we watched like on last Juneteenth. I think we watched this show with my mom about Juneteenth.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So some people in the past, they've done cookouts and they do fireworks with, and they do the color for Juneteenth is red. So red is supposed to represent perseverance and sacrifice. So they'll have, watermelon, like red velvet cake and, a red drink. So, and some people, they will get together, reflect on the day, remember the past, and like we are today, we're doing today, we're reflecting and we're thinking about ways to keep the struggle moving, because it's not over. We have to continue moving forward and fighting for our right, because we haven't gotten everything that we deserve to have, we're entitled to. Another way that other people celebrate is they take this time, Juneteenth, to support Black-owned businesses, and also donate to Black causes and organizations focused on Black causes and communities like the Althea Project. So that's something that we can do, because we have to support our organizations that are fighting for our causes. It's very important. And then also, now that you've learned something, tell your friends. Maybe you can tell your mom or you tell your dad what you learned. Spread the word, educate each other, okay? Because we all need to know. Because if we all know what our history is, it helps us for our future. If you know who you are, you know where you're going, you know you have a better sense of what your rights are. Okay, so now in school, if they're not teaching this, you can say, hey, on this day, this is what happened. It's really important. When you know your history, you can advocate for yourself. You know your rights. And then also in right now, actually, there's a lot of events going on in commemoration of this year's Juneteenth. So there's a lot of virtual events going on. So the National Museum of African American History and Culture, they have a digital resources that you guys can check out, after this program. Then there's the Museum of African Diaspora. They have a day-long lineup of virtual talks and workshops. And then also, if you're in New York, or you from here as well, they also have they have an in-person and virtual programs going on that are going to span until tomorrow. So, these are just a few things going on. But it's you guys determine, you and your family, you determine what you want to do. Maybe you want to get together, do a trivia game, or, just get together and talk about it, make plans. What are you going to do? What cause do you want to, work on or fight for? And, one thing I really wanted to point out is, so in the clip that Dr. Nuriddin showed about with Kamala Harris, and they pointed out the lady, Miss Opal Lee, 94-year-old, who has fought for Juneteenth being a holiday. It's really important to know that whatever you want to fight for, keep fighting for it, because you may not see the fruit of your labor in your own time, but the generations that come after you will benefit from it, like we are. We've benefited from the generations that came before us. So whatever you're fighting for, like Miss Opal, she's 94. She's lucky enough to see the fruit of her labor in her own time. But whatever you fight for, don't think of yourself, but think of the others you're doing it for. And so just keep that in mind as we keep this struggle. There are times when you'll be, disappointed, you'll be fed back, but don't give up, because so many of those who came before us didn't give up, and we are benefiting from their efforts. So whatever you're fighting for, whatever you're working for, keep fighting on and keep working towards that. It may not be for you, but it may be for your generations to come. So thank you.
Thank you so much to our speaker, Sister Amirah, and also Dr. Nuriddin. I really appreciate it. So that's really all we have for today. And I'm glad we stopped right on time, because there is another program. I'm sure there are lots of programs going on. There's another program I'd like to encourage you all to attend. One of our stars at the Afia Project is going to be presenting there. It's oral history type thing. I saw one of their programs a few weeks ago, and it was excellent. Hajar is going to be presenting there. Inshallah, I'll put the link in the chat box for you all to join. But I really appreciate you spending this day with us. Happy Juneteenth, everybody. Please stay connected to us. You can reach us online on our website, theafiaproject.org, and also on our social media platforms on Facebook, Instagram, and also YouTube. Thank you all so much. Assalamu alaikum. Bye.
Alaikum salam. Bye-bye.
All right. Any questions? Any burning questions? I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to run up to the next program. Are there any burning? I'm going to stop sharing. Any burning questions, guys, that Sister Amirah and Dr. Nuriddin can answer for us? You can raise your hand. Feel free to. While I'm also going to put the thing in the link. Everything was perfectly fine. Everyone understood it. All right. I'm going to put, for parents, especially if you want to log on, I'm going to put this in the chat box. Oh, I see someone left a message in the chat box. Hang on. Let me see. It's really long. Okay. Happy World Sickle Cell Disorder Day. Today is another reminder of the importance and need to continue to advocate and educate about one of the least talked about world public health diseases that affects a lot of Black descendants. That's true. We must fight for the attention sickle cell disorder deserves in terms of research, treatments, better treatment for healthcare workers, etc. Throughout today and beyond, but especially today, I want to challenge you to bring up a conversation relating to sickle cell with someone you see today. It is no coincidence that today also commemorates the emancipation of our people, but the fight continues for total equality, for total equity, not equality, equity, especially health equity when it comes to Black health. We as a people must fight and support any effort to achieve this. Happy Juneteenth. Thank you so much. Who is Evie? Thank you. I really appreciate that. You want to say something about that, Dr. Nuriddin? This is excellent.
I don't think there's much more for me to say. I think it was a very poignant point that was made in the chat. I'm glad that was mentioned.
Yeah, we certainly have a long way to go.
In World Sickle Cell Day, definitely.
Yeah, we certainly have a long way to go. So I put the link in the chat box. Please copy it and click on it so you can tune into the next event. I'm sure you guys have your days packed, so I'm not going to hold you much longer. We really appreciate you spending this hour with us. Thank you all so very much. All right. Assalamu alaikum. Bye-bye.